April 1986. Chernobyl became a silent, radioactive wasteland. Thousands were evacuated, and wildlife was presumed doomed. Decades later, the world buzzed with a new claim. Scientists released 10,000 wolves into the zone, turning nuclear ruins into a $50 million wildlife paradise. But can this astonishing story be real? Or is there something the headlines never told us? A line was drawn on the map of northern Ukraine in the spring of 1986, a boundary that would become known around the world as the Chernobyl exclusion zone. In the days after the reactor explosion, more than 116,000 people were ordered to leave their homes. Entire towns emptied in a matter of hours, leaving behind schools, livestock, and family photographs. The official evacuation covered roughly 1,000 square miles, an area larger than some countries. Soviet authorities declared the zone off-limits, enforcing strict controls on entry and land use. Radiation levels inside the zone soared to 400 times higher than normal background, contaminating forests, rivers, and farmland. The red forest, once a thriving stand of pine, turned orange and died within days, blanketed by radioactive fallout. Rivers like the Pripyat carried cesium and strontium downstream, spreading contamination through the water system. For decades, the exclusion zone was treated as a scientific no man's land. Maps marked it as a permanent scar, a place where human life was not expected to return for centuries. With people gone, the land changed quickly. Fields that once grew wheat and potatoes disappeared under fast-growing birch and willow. Asphalt cracked as roots pushed through, and abandoned villages began to crumble into the earth. Fences rusted, roads vanished under moss and grass, and the silence was broken only by the wind or the distant call of a bird. In the absence of humans, the ecological vacancy stretched for miles in every direction. For large mammals, especially predators, this was an opportunity rarely seen in modern Europe. The legal and physical barriers that kept people out also kept poachers and industry away. Over time, the exclusion zone became a vast, accidental experiment in what happens when an entire landscape is left to recover on its own. The question was no longer whether life could return, but what form it would take in a place shaped by both disaster and abandonment. Stories began to circulate online, each one more dramatic than the last. According to the most viral versions, a group called the International Wildlife Consortium masterminded a plan to rescue Chernobyl's dead zone with an army of wolves. The number was always bold and specific. 10,000 wolves gathered from Siberia, Canada, and across Europe, supposedly transported by truck and cargo plane, then released into the radioactive forests. Social media posts mapped out a three-phase operation: 3,000 wolves in the first year, 4,000 in the next, and the final 3,000 to complete the so-called rewilding. The narrative claimed that the project was fueled by a €15 million investment from the EU Environmental Fund. Headlines and blog posts described scientists fitting every wolf with GPS collars and monitoring their movements as the animals fanned out across the zone. Within months, the wolves were said to have conquered 850 square miles, forming new packs and restoring the balance of nature where humans feared to tread. Linked to these claims was the promise of an economic miracle. Viral infographics boasted that the wolf zone would become Europe's newest wildlife destination, drawing tens of thousands of tourists. Some posts touted a $50 million annual windfall, with visitors spending hundreds of dollars each to see the predators in their radioactive kingdom. Guides, researchers, and local businesses were, according to these stories, reaping the benefits of the world's most ambitious ecological experiment. Every detail was laid out with the confidence of a press release. A lead scientist named Dr. Elena Volkov, a 94% survival rate for the wolves, and even rumors of genetic resistance to radiation. The wolves, these stories insisted, had not only survived, they had built a paradise from disaster. The legend grew with each retelling, spreading across forums, news aggregators, and click-driven headlines, always promising that the impossible had been achieved on the edge of the world. Official records in Ukraine are built on paperwork, permits, manifests, quarantine logs. Every animal crossing into the Chernobyl exclusion zone is supposed to leave a trail with border entries, veterinary checks, and environmental approvals. For a movement as large as 10,000 wolves, the system would generate a mountain of files. Yet, when researchers and journalists combed through the archives, the expected evidence was nowhere to be found. Permit logs from the State Agency on Exclusion Zone Management list no entries for large carnivores after 2018. The Ministry of Environment's public releases mention elk, boar, even wild horses, but not a single reference to imported wolves, let alone thousands. CITE's trade records, which track every international transfer of protected species, show no shipments of wolves into Ukraine for reintroduction. Customs and veterinary authorities responsible for quarantine and disease control have no record of live wolf imports entering the zone. Even the environmental impact assessments required for any major wildlife project contain no proposals or approvals for a mass release. The administrator's files, usually thick with forms and official stamps, are silent on the subject. In every place where bureaucracy should have left its mark, there is only empty space. The paper trail that should map out a logistical feat of this scale simply does not exist. Satellite images from the last decade reveal a patchwork of green where fields once stood. Today, about 2/3 of the Chernobyl exclusion zone is woodland. Dense stands of birch, pine, and oak have quietly reclaimed the abandoned farmland. Ecologists walking these forests note the thick undergrowth and the return of species like roe deer and wild boar, but also the persistent silence in some corners, where radiation hotspots linger and tree growth slows. Field notes from Ukrainian researchers describe wolf tracks crisscrossing the muddy banks of the Pripyat, evidence of a stable but modest predator population, far from the thousands claimed of viral stories. Tourism data tells a quieter story as well. In 2019, before the war and the pandemic, the exclusion zone welcomed just over 100,000 visitors. A record year, but still a fraction of major national parks. Most guests came for the history, reactor ruins, Soviet relics, and the haunting emptiness of Pripyat. Wildlife sightings are rare bonuses, not the main event. Spending is steady but modest, with average trips focused on guided tours and brief stays in Kiev. The real economy of the zone is measured in controlled permits and day trips, not in the millions once promised by online headlines. The landscape is healing, but its recovery is slow, uneven, and guided by nature's own timeline, not by the claims of a manufactured paradise. Peer-reviewed studies on Chernobyl's wildlife reveal a story far more complex than viral headlines suggest. DNA samples from wolves and other mammals inside the exclusion zone show evidence of genetic damage, mutations that can affect immune function and reproduction. Researchers have documented smaller brain sizes in some birds, increased rates of cataracts, and subtle shifts in animal behavior, all linked to chronic exposure to low-level radiation. These findings challenge the narrative of a simple, miraculous recovery. While animal populations have rebounded in the absence of people, the invisible toll of radiation lingers in cells and chromosomes. International monitoring teams, including the IAEA, have cautioned against framing Chernobyl as a triumph of nature over disaster. In formal reports, scientists warn that celebrating the zone as a paradise risks overlooking the real costs, mutations that may not become fully visible for generations, and ecological changes that could ripple outward in unpredictable ways. The ethics of science communication come into sharp focus here. When stories of superwolves or economic miracles circulate unchecked, they can drown out years of careful and often unsettling fieldwork and genetic analysis. The responsibility to report accurately is not just academic. It shapes public understanding and future policy. In Chernobyl, the line between hope and hype is written in the DNA of the animals themselves. Today, Chernobyl's wild resurgence isn't a miracle engineered by scientists, but a stark lesson in how nature adapts when people disappear. Myths persist, but the truth is more profound. Abandoned places can heal, often without our intervention. The real story is what happens when we finally step back. Share your thoughts below.